Hello and welcome. I'm Becky Norton from the Spirit of 76 Museum, and we're here with Jenny Arntz, the Director of Main Street Wellington. If you've been following our videos, you know that we have left the museum for just a little while, and we've decided to branch out and talk to some people who have knowledge of a lot of the history of Wellington and ancestors who were connected to some of the people that I've already talked about in our talks from the museum. So today I would like to introduce you to Larry Broome, who was a businessman here in Wellington, had a big part, and has a great family history that we're going to spend some time talking about. So Larry, why is this building that we're in right now, we are in Main Street office right now, why is it special to you?
Well, I worked here when I was in high school for Grist. I was sitting in a class in high school. It was 1956, and McCormick came in and opened the door and yelled, "Broome, you want a job?" I said, "Yes." He wouldn't say no.
Yes, Mr. McCormick was our principal.
Yeah.
I didn't know him, but everybody who went through school about Larry's era knew Mr. McCormick
yes,
very
he
well.
knew Mr. McCormick.
Yes.
Anyway, he said, "You go down after school and see Mr. Grist." So I came after school, saw Mr. Grist, and he hired me. Well, that's big news. I worked here all through high school, and in my first year of college, when I came home for the summer, I worked for him then too. And then I did until I bought the store in 1975.
So is that why you decided to become a pharmacist?
Yes, actually it did, because he took an interest in me, and he made me do things that I didn't know how to do, but I learned. He had me make preparations. He had me make the binder. Binder had his own label, cough syrup, because Doc Binder was alive then, and I made that. And he made some liniments, and I had to make those, and they were sold in the store. And
Would you like to show the picture of
Yeah,
Mr. Grist,
this
and
is
then we'll
Grist.
show Doc Binder?
Grist he was a good man. I got along with him very well. I just did as he told me to do.
Yes.
A lot of people had some difficulty with him, but I didn't.
Yeah. And this is Doc Binder. We'll be talking about him. We have several things from Doc Binder over at the museum.
Yeah, I have some things at home that I'm going to get to Scott and see what he wants. I have a lot of old prescription records
Yes.
going back to the teens.
Wow.
And there might even be some upstairs in the building. I'm not sure. I'll have to go back up and look.
So you really didn't have any interest in farm? That wasn't something that you said when you were younger, I really want to be a pharmacist?
No, I would never have thought about it. But
Okay.
as I worked through high school, he thought that would be a good field for me, and it was. So when I graduated, I applied to Ohio Northern University and got in. I also worked in the drugstore down there. I had a job when I got there. I don't know if you remember George and Margaret Robertson.
I remember the name.
Robertson was a pastor of the Congregational Church, and she called to Ada, to the two drugstores, and see if they needed help from a student who was coming. And the drugstore was Pepper Drug, and I went down and talked to him, and he hired me.
Wow, that's great.
First day that I went to college down there, and I worked there all through college too.
So then you came back and bought the store. How long did it take before you were able to come back and buy the store?
Well, from 1964 to 1975, we lived in Vermilion for a while. I worked in Vermilion, and I worked in Brunswick for a while. From Brunswick, we moved back to Wellington in 73. In August of 73, we had our house built in Vermilion.
And when did you meet Eleanor?
In high school.
In high
She
school?
graduated in the same class as me. And of course, she just lived down the street from me.
Yeah. They're a lovely couple, I might add. They have lovely children. I was their 5th grade teacher. And
Anyway.
grandchildren. I had grandchildren too, actually.
Yeah. And I didn't know much about Doc Binder but I did look it up, and Doc Binder was from Meadville, Pennsylvania. He graduated from the Philadelphia College of Pharmacy in 1902, and his father, of course, was a German immigrant.
Mm-hmm.
And in 1906, he bought Tissett's Drugstore, which is owned by, finally found it, by Bert Skaden. It was in the building next door,
Okay.
where Rodell's was and where the attorney's office is now. And in 1920, he vacated that building and moved into this building, and this building had served as the drugstore from 1920 to 1985.
That's
And
amazing. That's amazing.
And I do remember Doc Binder. He was in the store a few times, and when Grist was on vacation, I would come open the store and let him in to take care of whatever needed to be done for anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, Doc Binder went to the Congregational Church, and that is our home church.
Mm-hmm.
And I do remember him from high school because he sat in the center row, down towards the front, the seat nearest the aisle, so he could get out and leave.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't have to talk to anybody. And he was quite a guy.
Yeah.
He didn't fill many prescriptions. I figured it out. Grist, when I bought the store, there was an article in the paper, and Grist said they had, from 1906 to 1946, they'd filled 13,522 prescriptions, and that comes out to about 225 a year.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
But it's because he made most everything.
I see. Yes.
So it took a long time to fill a prescription file, and I have many of them, and even up until 1946, most of the stuff he dispensed, he made.
That's really amazing. And then you learned how to do that also?
Yeah, I learned how to make some of them, but they don't make anything anymore.
No.
Rarely, once in a while, something is made.
Yes.
Most everything is packaged.
Yes.
It was a different time.
Yes. Well, you were also on the museum board at one time.
Yeah, as I said, my father-in-law, Carlone, and my wife's cousin, Chuck, were on the board. And I served with them, of course, and Harry Lee, and Ernie, and Marge
Mm-hmm.
Hennis, Jake McKinney, Ralph Miller. There's a few others on there, I can't remember right offhand.
But you were fortunate to serve with many of the founders of the museum.
Yeah, that was the original board of trustees, and it's in the museum somewhere.
Because I think the museum started in, what, 1968, wasn't it?
68, it was Harrison Comstock and somebody else, I'm not real
Right.
certain.
So what were some of the challenges that the board had at the museum in 1974?
Well, raising money.
And as you can see, that hasn't changed any. Vote yes, issue 13.
Raising money, and but Ernie Hennis was a go-getter. He used to go to the businesses in town and the factories and lay it out just what he needed, and they were very forthcoming. So they had money, they had to buy a lot of stuff, and they rounded up a lot of materials from around town. Yeah, it was interesting.
Because you didn't have any display cabinets or anything, did you?
No,
at that
the
time?
second floor was about all we had. There were some things on the top floor. The first floor still housed all the machinery from the enterprise. And that was there for a long time before it
Yes.
was taken out. And
Because
that
as
went
a
up.
kid, I remember it being in the downstairs of the building,
Yes.
the enterprise
Mhm.
building.
It was in the downstairs.
Yeah. Now, when you were on the board, were you a part of moving up to the third floor then, or was that after you were off the board?
Some of it, I helped move some of the stuff to the top floor, but I was gone by the early 80s. I was off the board by then. And what happened after that, I don't know. But it was interesting talking to him.
I am always amazed at how generous people have been, donating things that were important to
Oh,
their
yeah.
family
Oh, yeah.
to
This
put
is-
into the museum.
This museum is a lot, in fact, it's almost all about our town
It is,
and its history.
yes. And some of the surrounding farm area also.
Oh, yeah,
yes.
the surrounding, well, that's all part of it.
Right, right.
You can't discount the farmers.
No,
You have to
no.
have the farmers. And of course, these people
Absolutely
back in the
not.
day were all farmers.
That's exactly right,
Everything was
yes.
farming, and
Yes.
that was the business of the day.
Which is why we were able to have so much cheese exported from Wellington, is because of all
Yeah,
the little
yeah.
cheese factories from
Everybody did
farmers.
their part. All of my grandparents were farmers.
Yeah,
I'm sure that's true for anybody my age.
yeah, yeah. And getting less so. You know,
Getting
when I
less.
was growing up, there were an awful lot, everybody I knew, their dads farmed, and if they worked someplace else, it was quite an oddity to have someone move into the neighborhood who didn't farm.
But
But,
you need to support the farmers.
Yes.
It takes so much money and back-breaking work to
Mhm.
keep on going. It's amazing. Farmers amaze me.
Yeah. It's quite a life. But, well, since we were talking about you being on the museum board, I thought we would like to talk a little bit about this piece that is behind us here, because I know you're connected to it and have all kinds of stories.
I can tell you.
Um,
Do you want me to start with the top?
Well, let me tell people, first of all, this is a facsimile of a family tree that Larry received, and he's going to tell us the story of how he came about having this fantastic piece. But because the original was so frail, we did a facsimile of it that we will have in the museum. So Larry, I will turn it over to you so that you can tell us how you came to have the original and what this is all about.
Well, when my grandparents died in the late 40s and early 50s. My Aunt Frances Edmonds, I called her Aunt Frankie, she never married,
Mm-hmm.
but she lived in the house. And when she went into, it's like assisted living
Yes. Mm-hmm.
back in the 60s and 70s, she didn't have room for a lot of stuff. So I was going to visit her one day, and she just handed me this thing. It was all folded up. She said it was the family tree. So I took it home and put it in the drawer, and I left it for a long time without looking at it.
Mm-hmm.
Busy with young kids, you do that sort of thing.
Right, yes.
And when I did open it up, I saw the pictures and the names on here. And of course, living in Wellington, you know who Herrick is.
Sure.
And I worked in the drugstore in high school on Herrick Avenue West, and my mother-in-law worked at Herrick Library, and my wife helped out at Herrick Library. And I knew about him, but I didn't know I was related. So that was a surprise to me. Nobody had ever talked about it. Of course, I was the youngest of my grandparents' children, grandchildren.
Yes, yes.
So, you know, and most of my other relatives are gone too, so they had no way to talk to about it.
And where's Myron T on your chart?
Myron T is down here. He's married to Mary Holbert. Herrick. He is here, and as I was saying, they had the two sons, Myron Herrick, and one Orrin Rosell Herrick, who would have been the grandfather of the late Bob Herrick, of
Okay.
course,
Yes.
the great-grandfather of great-great-grandfather of Christine Ayres. Christine Ayres Rodacci.
Rodacci,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
So where are you on here?
Okay, I'm over here. My grandmother was Abigail Holbert, and she married Charles Edmonds, and so I'm on the list over here on the youngest one, right there.
Right there.
And you notice the spelling of the name. Laurance. I was born in 1940. Well, that was supposed to have been my name, but on my birth certificate they spelled it Lawrence.
Ah,
This is
okay.
a family name because there are other Lawrences on that. And one of their, the children of the Hobarts was Lawrencey, and their granddaughter, my great aunt, was Lawrencey, my grandfather's sister.
So how far, where does this end? This particular family tree, what year is the last date on it?
1950.
1950.
My great aunt, Lawrencey West, she was married to Fred West. He was a farmer in this area in the early 1900s. She was widowed pretty early.
Now, I understand that some genealogy has been done past 1950. Did you do it, or did someone else do that?
I think that might have been a relative of mine from Pittsfield, Lynn Youngblood.
Oh, yes, she's a relative of my husband. My grandfather's brother, Andy Edmonds, married Ola McRoberts. And she's and the
part of
Roberts,
that. And
yes.
that's also part of the Norton family.
Yes, yes it is. I was just going to say,
The
the
Norton
McRoberts.
family is related to the McRoberts.
Are you finding out a lot of people are related to each other in
Also,
Wellington?
Tim Simonson is related somehow to the McRoberts. I don't know exactly
We'll have to
how
look
it
about
is.
that. Well, let's talk about the really not that this isn't fascinating, because it's wonderful to find out about Myron Herrick after we hear so much about him. And he really had such a stellar career. But as you went back farther, what fascinating thing did you find out about your ancient relatives?
Well, I'll start out
Alright.
because I had to write this down. You see over in here, they tell about these Revolutionary War people that they were related to. So I did look them up, and they talk about Jeduthan Cross, and who was the other one? Demi. Well, this man, I have a bigger picture of him when he was a little bit younger. This is it. This is Orrin Holbert. And
He's looking a little happier in this photograph.
yeah, he's younger in that
He's younger.
picture. He's younger in that picture. This was taken probably not long before they passed away. Okay. Orrin's father was Eliphalet Holbert.
Okay.
And Eliphalet, let's see, served in the Revolution. And Mahatabel Demi, Deming, was his mother, and she was the sister of Captain Elijah Demi, and he's on here, she just calls him Captain. And Lucinda Yeaman's mother was Abigail Cross Yeamans, and her brother served in the Revolution. His name was Jeduthan Cross, and that's listed up here too. And back to Orrin. Orrin died in 1878, and my great-great-grandmother Lucinda applied for veterans benefits. She received $8 a month until the time of her death in 1994.
My goodness.
That seemed like what, $8
Yeah,
back
that
then?
was a long
That's quite
way.
a bit.
Yes.
$8.
Yes.
And that's about her mother, Abigail Cross. I traced her back to Salem, but I couldn't connect her with anybody because Ephraim Herrick, he was the beginning of the Herricks.
Okay.
His wife was Mary Cross,
All right.
so it's the same.
Yes.
Anyway, the Herrick family was very much involved in the witch trials. Ephraim had 3 other brothers, and they served as judges who pronounced sentence on the defendants. Ephraim was not a judge, but his son was married to the sister of Sarah Good,
Oh, yes.
who was pronounced guilty and executed.
Mm-hmm.
And it upset him a lot, Ephraim's family.
Yes.
His boys left Massachusetts. I can't remember. Myron and Eric's father was Timothy, and his father was also called Timothy. And it was the one before them that moved, I think, to New York and then to Pennsylvania. And from Pennsylvania, they moved to Huntington.
Wow.
But the reason they left because of the effects of the witch trial.
So politics were dividing people even back then.
Oh yeah, very much so. But the witch trial was all politics. There were two very important families and wealthy families. There were the Putnams. If you remember, Rufus Putnam was the one who founded Marietta. There was the Putnams and the Porters. The Putnams were extremely wealthy. They owned a lot of land. They controlled the church and had a lot of businesses. But the other family was the Porters. The Porters were even more wealthy because they controlled a lot. They owned a lot of land. They had a dam and sawmill, and they were involved in shipping. They were really wealthy.
Yes.
There was one church, and the Putnams thought they knew it all. They were kind of cocky. So they picked a minister out that the Porters did not like and did not approve of. That minister was Samuel Parrish. And it was Samuel Parrish's daughter, after being reprimanded and scolded by her parents, threw a fit. And she said it wasn't her fault because she'd been bewitched. Well, it spread.
Oh,
It
yes.
spread until it got really bad.
Yes.
And one of the things that made it so bad was this rivalry between the two families. And what made it even worse is that the dam that the Porters built bursted and ruined some of the Putnam land.
Oh.
And then there really was bad.
Yes, yes. So it just escalated from there.
Yeah, it escalated from there. And anyway, the Porters and the Putnams didn't get along. But when I was reading some of this, I was thinking about Rufus Putnam, who founded Marietta. Well, it was Rufus Putnam and Amos Porter, both of them relatives to these two families.
So did they get along?
Oh yeah. Amos's daughter, Nancy Porter, married the nephew of Rufus Putnam, Alan Putnam. It was pretty interesting.
I was going to say, I think they could make a movie about that.
Yeah.
You know,
Anyway,
it has a happier ending
the
than
Porter
some.
family moved to the Marietta area. And Marion Porter was one of the daughters. She was also the grandmother of Floyd Moore. And my uncle Ray Moore and my aunt Erna Moore. And Bob Lent's mother was Elsie Lent. So
Yes.
that's the connection
Wow. It's great.
to the Porters.
Yes. I think this all goes along. I had said in one of our other videos about how you never know what's going to affect history. We go about our daily lives just as your ancestors did.
It may be the littlest thing.
Yes, and then to have this wonderful family tree and see that you were related to people that you didn't realize, that your history went clear back to the Salem witch trials is quite a phenomenal thing. And you just never know
It's very interesting.
as you go about your life. And it also shows that here in Wellington, history is very, very important to so many of us. Not that it isn't to other people, but I think that this brings home that ordinary, everyday people have history, and that it's really important that you know your history.
Everybody's got a history.
Just like you said, you didn't realize.
Sometimes you have to dig it up.
Yes, and you didn't realize who you were related to until you started looking. Don't forget to ask your parents, your grandparents, or if you are lucky enough to have great grandparents and you're old enough to understand, ask them questions. My grandparents and my parents are not able to answer my questions now, and I have a lot of them. So do ask.
Well, I ran into the same thing because by the time I discovered what all this was, there was nobody left
Yes.
to ask anything. I had to look it up. I
Yes.
found about as much as I can.
Yes. Well, Larry, thank you so much for coming and being with us today. We really appreciate it. And don't forget, ask about your family history so you know where you came from, and it kind of helps guide where you're going. Thank you for joining us, and we
Thank
hope that
you. I
you'll come
appreciate
again. Thank you, Larry.
I was glad to have the chance to do it.
Thank you so much.